You probably think you know Alastor Mad-Eye Moody, the grizzled ex-Auror with a whirling blue eye and enough scars to fill a spell book. But tonight, you're going to see the man behind the myth, the one who walked through history's darkest corridors long before anyone called him mad. The story begins in a time when the Ministry of Magic was still trying to convince itself that peace could last. The smell of battle not yet faded from the corridors after the first rise of darkness. You stand in the flickering lamplight of the Auror office, the walls humming faintly with protective charms and suspicion. Quills scratch, parchment rustles, and a younger Moody, before the grizzle, before the paranoia, adjusts his coat and squints at a file that should have been burned years ago. The air feels heavier here, doesn't it? You can almost taste the iron of secrecy, that blend of danger and duty that clings to every wizard who swore an oath to defend others but never quite trusted anyone again. There's an unspoken truth in this office. If you survive long enough, you start to resemble the enemies you hunt. And you probably won't survive this story without questioning whether you'd have done the same. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Because once this mission begins, we won't get another chance to breathe. Moody back then wasn't famous yet, but he was already different. He studied patterns others ignored, the way a curse splintered stone, the direction blood splashed when a wand backfired, the faint scent of dark magic like burnt sugar in the air. His obsession with details made him brilliant and unbearable. Some said he could see through walls, others said he could see through souls. The truth? He could see danger in everyone, even those on his side. You watch as he scribbles notes onto a cracked map. Disappearances in Nocturne Alley, strange footprints that vanish mid-step, a whispered name only the most reckless dared speak aloud. That name would come to define him. But for now, Moody still walks with a purpose that borders on madness, tracking shadows through rain-slick cobblestones where every reflection could be a wand drawn in secret. He passes a beggar who's not a beggar, a child who's not a child, each a reminder that illusion and reality often share a cup in the wizarding world. You catch a faint reflection of yourself in a puddle, distorted by the ripples, and you wonder how long anyone can look for monsters without becoming one. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The file lands on your desk with a dull thud, thicker than most, sealed with a wax crest bearing the mark of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and stamped twice with red ink. Confidential, for Auror eyes only. You run a hand over the parchment, feeling the faint pulse of enchantment woven into the fibers. This isn't just any assignment. It's one of those cases whispered about in the corners of the ministry cafeteria, the kind everyone pretends not to know, but somehow always does. The heading reads, Operation Ashfall. Moody's name appears on the second page, half buried among code numbers and half erased signatures. You can almost hear his gravelly mutter from decades later, constant vigilance. But in this file, he's not the paranoid legend yet. He's the man sent to do what no one else will. The war is brewing again, though the ministry doesn't dare say it aloud. Strange attacks in northern England, entire wizarding families vanishing without a trace. No dark mark, no witnesses, just silence. A fringe historian, somewhere in the archives, later claimed these disappearances were connected to the early Death Eater trials, But that theory never saw daylight. The Ministry preferred its silence tidy and its heroes invisible. Moody, though, was never tidy. He demanded answers from everyone, even those supposedly on his side. He questioned the paperwork, the motives, even the chain of command. You can imagine the tension in the briefing room. A half-dozen Aurors fidgeting while Moody flips through evidence photos, every movement sharp and deliberate. His eyes, both of them still his own back then, flick from one image to the next, like a hawk scanning a field for movement. These people didn't just vanish, he says. Someone wanted us to think they did. And with that, a silence settles so heavy it feels alive. Here's your first dose of reality. The wizarding world wasn't built on justice. It was built on secrets that everyone agreed not to discuss. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes here without realizing that. The quirky tidbit historians like to bring up? Moody refused to use enchanted quills, said they could be bewitched to alter reports. He wrote everything by hand, in an angular script that nearly broke quills in half. The open scholarly debate that still lingers today is whether his paranoia saved more lives than it ruined. As night falls, you follow him through the damp streets near Diagon Alley, his cloak swaying like a shadow detached from its owner. Somewhere in those cobblestones, a clue lies buried. The trace of an experimental spell the Ministry pretended didn't exist. The only witness? A ratty old woman who swears she saw a man vanish into thin air with a grin like he'd planned it. Moody's expression hardens. He's seen this kind of smile before. The smile of someone who knows the rules and chooses to break them anyway. By dawn, he's already packed for the north. His office cleared, his desk bare except for one note scrawled in the margin of the Ashfall file. If I'm right, this goes deeper than magic. You can almost hear the rain start again outside, tapping against the window like a warning. And deep down, you know, this isn't the kind of story that ends with applause. You arrive at the Ministry a few days later to a silence so sharp it feels deliberate. The Auror office is half empty, the lamps dimmed, and on Moody's desk lies a report that no one dares sign. A traitor among us, the first line reads, written in a hand trembling not from fear, but from guilt. This is where things begin to unravel. The mission that started as a hunt for missing families has turned inward. The suspect list now includes Aurors themselves. You can practically hear the whispers bouncing off the stone walls. Double agents, memory charms, stolen records. The kind of rot that doesn't come from outside, but festers quietly in the foundation. Moody, predictably, doesn't flinch. He's standing in front of the mirror-paneled wall, muttering incantations that reveal magical traces invisible to the naked eye. The reflection flickers with faint green glows. Forbidden curses used recently and close. Someone within the Ministry had been casting spells right under everyone's nose. It's the kind of discovery that makes you lean closer, feeling that magnetic pull toward danger. But if you were here, you'd also notice the fatigue setting in around Moody's eyes, the kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from watching the world corrode in slow motion. He starts interviewing his own colleagues. Every question is a spell, every silence an accusation. One young recruit cracks under pressure, babbling about bribes and a shadow network trading information to the highest bidder. Moody doesn't raise his voice. He never needs to. His calm is worse than fury. He simply leans closer and says, "When you can't trust anyone, start by trusting fear." It's a strange sort of logic, but it works. The recruit spills everything. Coded messages sent through enchanted quills, meetings disguised as routine patrols, and one name repeated in every correspondence: Ashfall. Turns out, the operation wasn't about protecting people at all. It was about recovering something. Something ancient, something so dangerous it had to be erased from magical history altogether. Scholars still debate what it was: a relic, a spell, a weapon. The files were purged long ago, conveniently during one of those mysterious ministry security reorganizations. But the fact remains: someone within the Aura ranks wanted it badly enough to betray their own. The quirky part? Moody began wearing mismatched socks around this time, enchanted to hum slightly when someone nearby told a lie. It sounds absurd, but reports confirm it worked. Several confessions came that way. The mainstream historical record simply calls this period internal restructuring. But between you and me, that's ministry code for chaos. By the end of the week, Moody's office is empty again, save for a single glass of fire whiskey and a tattered map pinned with tiny enchanted needles. The northern region glows faintly under candlelight, the trail he's been following since the start. But now he knows he's being watched by both sides. As you lean in, you can almost hear him whisper, "Let them watch." Because in his mind, the only way to find the truth is to walk straight into the trap and hope it's the right one. The night he leaves London, the air feels wrong. The kind of thick, metallic stillness that comes before a storm or a duel. You can hear the low groan of the ministry's wrought iron gates as Moody pushes through, his boots echoing across the cobblestones of Whitehall Alley. The lanterns flicker, and somewhere deep beneath the city, the underground wards pulse like a heartbeat. This is where his legend starts to take shape. The midnight encounter. You follow him down into the labyrinth beneath the Thames, a network of tunnels carved centuries ago by smugglers and later borrowed by the Aura office for missions that weren't meant to exist. The walls shimmer faintly with old protective runes, most cracked or fading, each one a reminder that even magic has a shelf life. Moody moves like a man who's memorized every shadow, wand drawn, voice low. Then comes that sound, a faint click, metal on stone, and before he can turn, a curse slices the air, bright and sharp like lightning trapped indoors. He ducks, counters. The tunnel erupts in flashes of red and green. You can almost feel the heat from the spells against your skin, the smell of burnt dust and ozone filling the confined air. His opponent is fast, too fast for a street-level dark wizard. Whoever this is, they've trained with auras before. "Show yourself!" Moody shouts, his voice echoing down the tunnel. What answers isn't a voice, but laughter, low, calm, familiar. That's the moment you realize the traitor wasn't just within the ministry. The traitor was one of the best. There's a moment where time seems to slow. Two silhouettes locked in mirrored motion, spell meeting spell in a dance that feels almost rehearsed. And then the flash, not from a wand, but from an explosion charm triggered on the ceiling. The roof caves in, the tunnel collapses, and Moody barely escapes with one arm shielding his face. When he emerges, coughing through the smoke, his left eye burns with a curse wound so deep it refuses to heal. That's how it happens. The beginning of the Mad Eye legend. Not in glory, but in pain and betrayal. The mainstream historical record says he lost it in a raid against Death Eaters years later, but unofficial reports suggest this was the real night. The quirky tidbit? The spell that destroyed his eye wasn't standard dueling magic. It was experimental, created by a ministry task force that was later dissolved for ethical reasons. The open scholarly debate that remains unsolved. Who exactly fired it? Some historians claim it was the traitor Auror. Others argue Moody himself may have deflected it by mistake. Only one person knew for sure, and he took that secret with him into the fog. When dawn breaks, he limps into a nearby inn, wraps his face in bandages, and orders tea so bitter it could strip varnish off a table. You can almost hear him muttering into the cup. You trust no one, and you live to tell it. That's the night he stopped being just Alastor Moody and became the one the dark wizards would whisper about. He'd paid for his lesson in blood and silence, and in return, the Ministry gave him what it always gives its broken heroes: another mission. You return to the Ministry a week later, and it's as though Moody's name has been erased from the building itself. His office door stands open, files removed, even the brass plate that once bore his title gone, as if the walls themselves were told to forget him. But legends have a way of echoing, don't they? Whispers follow you through the corridors. Stories of a scarred Auror who walks the edges of sanctioned work. A man who doesn't trust even his own reflection. Officially, he's on medical leave. Unofficially, he's investigating something that should have been buried. The duel under the Thames wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something stranger. In the weeks that follow, reports surface of strange magical surges across the countryside. Not ordinary spell work, but a kind of raw, unstable energy no wand could properly control. Entire glades of forest warped overnight, streams running backward, animals vanishing without a trace. Moody, ever the bloodhound, connects the dots. Every surge occurs near sites once linked to the First Wizarding War, places of loss and secrecy. His notes, scrawled in the margins of old Ministry files, begin forming a pattern, and at the center of that pattern, one name keeps resurfacing: Ashfall. The same word from the traitor's file, the same word whispered during his first assignment. You can picture him in a dimly lit tavern in Yorkshire, cloak drawn tight, listening to a hooded witch speak of a vanished experiment, a magical artifact designed to amplify not power, but fear. Imagine that. A device that doesn't strengthen your magic, but your ability to terrify. According to some scholars, that's the very origin of certain dark enchantments that later resurfaced during the rise of you-know-who. The mainstream historical fact is that the Department of Mysteries conducted such experiments in the late 1960s, long before Voldemort's height of power. But those records were accidentally lost in a storage fire. Moody's theory? The weapon wasn't destroyed. It was hidden. The quirky tidbit: he started marking his maps with tiny X's shaped like lightning bolts, not because of any superstition, but because he said fear travels faster than truth. And oddly enough, many of those X's would later align with reported sightings of dark magical relics decades later. You trail him now through a moor under a leaden sky, the air cold enough to numb your teeth. His cloak snaps in the wind, his wand glowing faintly blue as he tracks magical residue left behind by an unseen enemy. The scent of sulfur fills the air, a signature of failed transfiguration. Someone was trying to change something that couldn't be changed. He kneels, fingers brushing the blackened ground, and mutters a spell to reveal what once stood there. The earth glows briefly, and a faint image flickers into view. A symbol, 2 concentric circles crossed by a single jagged line. The mark of Ashfall. And just as the vision fades, a voice behind him says, "You were supposed to stay out of this, Alastor." He turns sharply, wand raised, but the figure is already gone, leaving only a trace of blue smoke and a half-burned parchment bearing coordinates to a place that shouldn't exist. Historians still debate whether that encounter actually happened, but the next day, Moody booked passage east under a false name. His file ends there, just a blank space where a mission report should be. Whatever he found, he didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The train rattles through the fog-soaked valleys of Eastern Europe, its rhythmic clatter the only heartbeat in a landscape that feels suspended between dream and memory. You sit across from Moody in a half-empty carriage, watching as his reflection in the window flickers between light and shadow. He's traveling under the name Elias Gray, but his reputation precedes him, even here, in the borderlands where the ministry's reach fades and the old magic runs deep. Outside, ruined castles loom through the mist like sleeping giants, their towers draped in ivy and superstition. He's not on any official assignment now. This is off the books, off the grid, and entirely off the record. The coordinates from that burned parchment have led him east, to a place wizards once called the Veil Frontier, where time itself was rumored to warp under certain spells. The mainstream historical fact? In the early 70s, the Ministry and the Durmstrang Institute briefly cooperated on an unsanctioned research project near these mountains, studying ancient wards believed to predate even Merlin's era. The quirky detail: most of the researchers went missing within a month, and the official report blamed environmental instability, which is ministry code for we have no idea what we unleashed. Moody naturally wants to find out. He arrives at a crumbling village where the locals refuse to speak after sunset. The only sound is the wind whistling through broken chimneys, carrying the scent of iron and wood smoke. A tavern keeper hands him a room key with shaking hands and mutters, "Don't look at the mirrors after midnight." You can almost feel the temperature drop as he enters the room. One narrow bed, one cracked mirror, and a single candle that flickers too rhythmically to be natural. He sits, takes off his coat, and begins unrolling the map he's pieced together. A spiderweb of old trade routes and magical ley lines converging on one point. A ruined fortress labeled Krusov Citadel. The word Ashfall is scrawled beside it. That's where he'll go. The debate among magical historians today is whether Ashfall was a project or a place. Some claim it was a code name for a magical contagion experiment. Others believe it referred to a lost city built entirely through illusion magic, one that could appear or disappear at will. But the truth, Moody suspects, is simpler and more terrifying. Whatever it is, it feeds on fear. At dawn, he treks toward the citadel, wand in hand, boots crunching over frost-bitten grass. The forest closes in like it's listening. Every tree seems to lean a little closer, branches whispering in a language only paranoia understands. He's tired, colder than he admits, but too stubborn to stop. Halfway up the ridge, he finds evidence that someone's been here recently. Footprints, but not human. Too large, too heavy. The ministry dismissed the existence of magically engineered beasts after the 1956 Geneva Charm Accords. But Moody isn't the type to trust treaties. He follows the tracks until they vanish into thin air, and standing before him is the citadel, jagged and impossible, half formed from black stone and half from shadow. Its reflection in a frozen pond beside it doesn't match the real thing. The mirrored version flickers and moves. He steps closer, muttering a detection spell, and feels the ground tremble beneath his feet. This is no ruin. It's a living enchantment, a fortress made of memory and fear. If you were here, you'd probably turn back. But Moody doesn't. He grips his wand tighter, eye twitching, and mutters, "Let's see what lies you've got left." Then he steps through the archway, and the world bends around him like glass about to break. You stumble after him into a place that shouldn't exist, a city that feels like a reflection of your own mind. Every street bending toward something familiar and wrong. Moody calls it the Mirror City, and the name sticks because it doesn't just reflect light, it reflects thought. The moment you enter, you hear whispers that aren't yours. Memories, regrets, half-spoken curses, all tangled in the damp air. Buildings shimmer like mirages, flickering between marble and mist, as though they're deciding what to be. This is the Ministry's forgotten secret, the failed experiment they buried under the name Ashfall. According to obscure magical archives, the Mirror City was once designed as a containment realm for the darkest enchantments, an illusion strong enough to trap fear itself. The quirky historical tidbit: the original architect supposedly vanished into his own creation, leaving behind a note that read, "Reality only works when you stop trying to fix it." Moody's boots echo through empty plazas where statues seem to watch him. Every time he passes a window, his reflection lags behind by a few seconds, like it's thinking things through. You can feel it too, your heart racing at the thought that this place might not be showing what is, but what could have been. And somewhere within those reflections, something moves that shouldn't. The scholars who debate this part of Moody's history can never agree on whether he truly stepped into another realm or was trapped in an enchanted hallucination created by defensive wards. One camp insists he spent 3 days inside. Others claim it was seconds in real time. But in his mind, it felt like a lifetime. He begins to see versions of himself scattered throughout the city, some younger, some older, each carrying a different scar, a different regret. They whisper his name, warning him to turn back. He doesn't. Instead, he reaches the heart of the city, where a single tower stands surrounded by still water. Floating above that surface is a silver orb pulsing with faint light, breathing almost. The magic feels alive, ancient, heavy with memory. He realizes it's not a weapon, it's a record. A container for every fear ever projected here. A kind of magical consciousness built from the echoes of wizards who entered before him. The air vibrates with overlapping voices, asking him what he's afraid of. You can almost hear his answer, dry and low. Nothing that isn't true. The orb shatters, flooding the square with blinding light, and for an instant, the reflections become real. Every fear Moody's ever had, betrayal, failure, helplessness, steps forward as physical forms, surrounding him like an army of his own ghosts. The spells he fires back are quick, brutal, and useless. These aren't enemies that can die. The quirky part? When the city collapses, the only thing he carries out is his reflection, burned into the enchanted eye that he later forges from its remnants. Some say that's why his magical eye could see through walls, cloaks, and lies. It wasn't built, it was haunted. And before the light fades completely, Moody looks into the mirrored water one last time and mutters, "I see you now." Then everything, city, noise, reflection, vanishes like a breath on glass. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. When you open your eyes again, you're no longer in the Mirror City. At least, not in any way that makes sense. You're back in a cold field at dawn, the grass silvered with frost, your lungs aching as if you've been running for miles. Moody lies nearby, pale but alive, the old scars on his face now joined by something far stranger. The whirling blue eye. It's spinning wildly, scanning the air, twitching as though it has a mind of its own. You watch as he tries to still it with a trembling hand, muttering curses under his breath that don't sound entirely human anymore. That's when you realize something followed him out of the Mirror City. The Ministry's records never mention this, of course. Officially, he was recovered in the Carpathian region, suffering magical disorientation. But eyewitnesses from a nearby wizarding village claimed he walked into their tavern with a gaze that made even ghosts look away. For days afterward, he wrote furiously in a private journal, now locked away in the Department of Mysteries. Some historians think he was trying to exorcise the consciousness embedded in that new eye. Others believe he was talking to it. Either way, it started showing him things. Things no wizard should see. Shadows behind closed doors, conversations across continents, intentions hidden behind smiles. The quirky fact? He once told an apprentice Auror that he could see his thoughts forming before he spoke. The poor boy quit the next day. The debate that still rattles magical academia is whether the eye was cursed or enlightened. Did it gift Moody with impossible perception, or was it slowly showing him a version of reality that no sane person could survive? You can almost picture him in his London flat, every mirror covered with dark cloth, muttering to himself between sips of fire whiskey. "They're coming," he says, though no one ever asks who they are. His paranoia blooms like wildfire, yet every warning he gives, every outburst dismissed as madness, proves true weeks later. He becomes both legend and liability, the Auror who knows too much, and you, following his trail, start to wonder whether he's still hunting others, or just his own reflection. There's a moment recorded by a junior official who delivered files to him one morning. She claimed he was standing perfectly still, staring at his own eye in a mirror, whispering, "You're not me." Then, without looking away, he shattered the glass with a flick of his wand. Even after that, the reflection kept smiling for a few seconds longer than it should have. You can almost feel the chill creeping up your neck as you imagine it. That was the moment the Ministry started using the nickname Mad Eye. He didn't argue. He didn't care. The label was safer than the truth. The truth was that the eye had become something in between. A window not only into the physical world, but into fear itself. And fear, as Moody would later teach every Auror who survived training, was the purest form of knowledge. From that day on, he slept with one eye open, and the other always watching. The first snowfall of the year drifts outside the Ministry's enchanted windows, flakes swirling against invisible barriers, while inside the Auror office, the air feels heavier than stone. You walk through rows of parchment and files, following the faint scent of burned candle wax and rain-soaked leather. Moody is back, officially reinstated, though no one will say who authorized it. He moves like a ghost through the corridors now, the blue eye spinning beneath the scar tissue, scanning every angle of every corridor as if the world itself were plotting something. The younger Aurors whisper that he can see your lies before you tell them. The older ones know better. He can see your intentions. The mainstream historical record describes this period as the tightening of internal security, but you can tell it's something else entirely. Paranoia institutionalized. The Ministry, taking its cues from its most distrustful servant, installs new wards on every door, truth enchantments in every office. Every wand movement is logged. It's the dawn of surveillance in the wizarding world, and Moody, unwillingly or not, is its architect. The open scholarly debate. Did he do it to protect the Ministry, or to keep it from lying to itself? He doesn't answer the question, of course. Instead, he begins compiling something new, a private ledger of every spell, every crime, every lie he's ever seen. The quirky fact that slipped through official records is that he coded each entry in invisible ink that could only be read through his magical eye. Imagine that. Even his own truth could only be seen by something not entirely human anymore. You meet him one evening in the dim corridor near the records chamber, where he's leaning against the wall with a flask in hand, the faint clink of metal echoing like punctuation to his thoughts. "They think they can control everything," he mutters, eyes shifting between the ceiling and the floor. But control's just fear in uniform. He chuckles, though it's not the kind of laugh that belongs to comfort. It's the laugh of a man who's realized the world will never stop hiding from itself. That night, he's summoned before the Wizengamot to report on the Ashfall findings. And for the first time in his career, he lies. He tells them the fortress was empty, that nothing of magical significance was found. The courtroom hums with unease, but no one dares challenge him. Perhaps they sense it too, that the truth would cost more than silence. Afterward, he sits alone in the archives, sipping fire whiskey straight from the bottle, staring at a single folder labeled Project Mirror. His new eye flickers faintly, and for just a second, he smiles. Not kindly, not bitterly, but knowingly, as if the eye has just whispered a private joke to him. The historians who studied his life agree on one point. This was the night his mission changed. He was no longer hunting dark wizards or missing relics. He was watching the Watchers, protecting the world from the very people sworn to guard it. You can almost feel the weight of that kind of duty pressing down on your shoulders. Imagine spending a lifetime never sure if what you're seeing is real or just another reflection. Years pass, and the legend of Mad-Eye Moody grows taller than the man himself. You find yourself standing in the ruins of what used to be his safe house. Charred wood, cracked stone, everything smelling faintly of damp earth and secrecy. The ministry's reports say he retired quietly, but you know better. Moody never stopped working. He just stopped reporting. He became the shadow that shadows feared, an unregistered guardian moving through the alleys of wizarding London long after curfew. Neighbors spoke of strange lights at night, of muffled voices reciting spells that made mirrors tremble. They called it eccentricity. You call it preparation. Because by now, Moody knew something the ministry refused to admit. The war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. Every whisper about Death Eaters gone to ground, every untraceable curse that found its way into innocent hands, every ministry reform that promised safety at the cost of privacy, all of it tied back to that same invisible thread: Ashfall. The mainstream historical account claims the project was permanently dismantled, but in the archives of the Department of Mysteries, there's an unsigned memo written in Moody's exact hand that reads, "Fear cannot be destroyed, only redirected." The scholars who've studied his disappearance can't agree on what happened next. Some claim he was killed in a late-night raid gone wrong. Others insist he simply walked away, vanishing into his own network of hidden safe houses like smoke through keyholes. But there's one record, never published publicly, of a magical anomaly detected the night he vanished. A burst of energy from somewhere beneath London, faint but familiar, matching the Mirror City's magical signature. The quirky detail? Every reflective surface within a 5-mile radius warped slightly inward that night, like the world itself took a shallow breath, and then nothing. No body, no wand, just absence, and that one sentence left in his journal. If you're reading this, you're already being watched. You can almost see him, can't you? A figure limping down a rain-soaked alley, cloak wrapped tight. the whirling blue eye glowing faintly under the lamplight. Maybe he's still out there, a fragment of him at least, living between reflections, an eternal sentry in the cracks of our reality. The debate that still rages among magical historians is whether Moody ever truly returned from the Mirror City, or if what walked back into the world was only half of him, the other half still staring back from the other side of the glass. Either way, the result was the same. He became the embodiment of vigilance itself, a man so haunted by seeing too much that he made the rest of the world safer by never sleeping again. You reach the end of his story the way he might have wanted it, without certainty, without applause, just quiet understanding, because Moody never cared about glory. He cared about what hid in plain sight. And maybe that's why his legend still lingers in every auror's whisper, every wand's cautious twitch before a duel, every mirror that catches your eye a split second too late. Now the story softens, the storm settles, and the shadows you've been following finally recede. The hum of night returns to its ordinary rhythm, distant wind, creaking floorboards, the faint whir of something mechanical far away. You breathe slower now, the same way Moody must have after each mission, when silence was the only reward. The rain outside turns to drizzle, and you realize you've been holding your breath for too long. Let it go. This is where the mission ends, though the watch never truly does. The next time you catch your own reflection looking just a little too long, maybe don't flinch, just nod. Somewhere, perhaps in some mirror-lit corner of time, Alastor Moody nods back. His watch continues, and so does yours. Now close your eyes. Let the sound fade to a whisper, and remember, the bravest thing you can do in a world full of secrets is stay awake long enough to see the truth. Sleep well, constant watcher.